Welcome back, climbers. I'm your co-host, Kaylee Floyd, and this is another episode of Climbing Mount CMMC. Today, Bobby is joined by Adam Evans. Adam is a new senior compliance specialist at Axiom, and we are so excited to have him on our team. They're going to be talking today about the challenges that they're facing right now with CMMC, as well as the challenges they're facing when preparing for a Level 2 assessment. We hope you guys enjoy today's podcast.
All right, everybody, we're super excited to have Adam Evans here, who's joined the team. Congratulations. Welcome to the team, sir.
Thank you. Well, glad to be here. It's going to be a lot of fun.
Well, so part of the reason why we were looking to try to pick up someone is just we ran into each other, right, at some different conferences and kind of shared our passion for CMMC. And as we started really hitting the gas, I was like, I'm going to need some help. And the first person that popped in my head was you.
Thank you. It was kind of crazy to think about just where everything leads and where it comes from. I remember our conversation at IT Nation and was thinking about it, some of our interactions with LinkedIn, and weird how it all works out, but glad it did.
Yeah, me too. And we have got quite the challenge, don't we?
We do.
Yeah. So for those that are just tuning in or not familiar, we as a company are trying to tackle CMMC. And in this podcast, we're trying to be very transparent. So let's just dive into some hard-hitting questions. First off, what do you see probably the biggest challenge for us as a company to try to tackle being Level 2 ready to be assessment? Because at the time of this recording, the ruling has yet to come out. So we're not sure if it's going to be interim or a proposed ruling, which means it's either going to go in effect at the first quarter of this year, or if it's proposed, then late this year or early next year. So what do you see this challenge for MSPs? How do you see that?
The biggest challenge that I'm seeing, especially with our conversations, is not only how do we meet the compliance obligations ourselves as an MSP, but how do we cascade that down to the small, medium businesses that we support in a way that these SMBs can afford and an MSP can support without incurring too much operational overhead.
Well, because we've been doing this for quite a few years. I mean, I've been doing it for 20, 30 years, something like that. Axiom is 20 years. So I guess I've been doing this for 30 years. I lose track. Once you get to a certain age, you just don't really keep track anymore. And we were kind of talking about it. Your beard adds on a few extra years, right? At least 5, I would say. But we've been doing MSP services forever, but obviously some of what we know and do is going to translate over to supporting our clients, but some of it isn't. Can you kind of talk about your perspective on the challenge of what lessons we're going to have to learn about supporting those clients?
Yeah, I think the big one that I can see across the MSP industry is those ideas around risk assessments and change controls. We think when dealing with clients, there's all kinds of issues that come up. You research the issue and you go, well, I can just make this quick change real quick, solve the problem, and be done with this. Tickets closed, issue's not going to come up again. Great.
Client's happy.
Yep. But under CMMC and the rules there, have you done a risk assessment over it? What is the change management process? Because that change could negatively impact the confidentiality of information on that system.
Right.
And that's an extra level of, especially if you're a technical person, that's administrative overhead that you look at and go, this is slowing me down from getting onto that next ticket. And depending on the MSP and the ticket volume coming in, that's extra minutes that's keeping you from moving on to the next one as more tickets are queuing up.
Well, and that basically implies that you have to have a well-established engagement process with that client that is, you're ingesting the requests they have. A certain process has to be followed from the client as they're making the request to us and anyone that is going to be trying to do the same thing that we're going to be doing. That process has to be established. And that's not something that most MSPs are used to having to do. They just, like you said, they look at the ticket board, they go through and they knock them out. They kind of follow the IT Hippocratic Oath of do no harm, but that's it. I mean, that's pretty much it. Yeah. But they're not thinking about, like you're saying, risk assessments. So that is a different train of thought. That's a really good point, Adam. And that's something that, we're really focusing on. Another aspect is the matrix, right? The matrix that we have with vendors, but also the matrix we're going to have with our clients. Can you talk about that some?
Absolutely. I see that the issue twofold. One is on the client side of stuff and the expectations that can often get set with working with MSPs. You know, John Smith in accounting calls up because he's having a technical issue and says, "Hey, can you do this for me?" It may be completely out of scope for the MSP services, but he's sitting there going, "Well, it sounds like a technical issue, so of course I'm calling my MSP.
Right.
Why can't you help me? I want you to help me. We pay you to help me, right?"
Right.
So that's always its own challenge. But the other side of the coin is when we look at the vendors that MSPs work with, there's a ton of wonderful vendors out there. I could probably name them for the rest of the day. But at the end of the day, they're not enterprise vendors. They're working through some of the same challenges we are with limited budgets. When you sign up for vendor ABC, they're not getting multiple six-figure, a month clients and everything like you might see in the enterprise base. So they may not have the same resources that we do to develop out their own maturity
Right.
and to delineate what their responsibilities are, our responsibilities are. And then you also have to factor in they're likely the customer of another IT vendor as well. If they're cloud storage, they're probably in Microsoft or Amazon or Google's cloud environments. So deciphering and understanding all of their responsibilities that they're inheriting from those providers, the ones they do, and then the ones that we do, and then handing that down to our clients, that's a lot of work, and that's a big paper trail.
Right. And we're just not finding that most vendors are willing to have that discussion with us. Right. So we call them up and we're like, "Hey, we really need to talk to you about CMMC." And then we're like, "Hello, are you there?" Hello. They just hung up. I mean, like when you mention CMMC, they're just like dip. They're out of there. They don't like to. There's this general fear, I think, that a lot of these vendors have about that they might put themselves in a liability perspective. But I think if vendors just kind of chill a little bit and say, "Hey, all we're asking for you to do is continue doing what you have always done. Just share information about how you're doing it so that we can provide that to the assessor. Let us make the decision. We can decide on whether or not your tool is going to be effective. You don't have to make a promise. All you have to do is promise to tell us how you're doing things." And what's funny is a lot of vendors even struggle with doing that. They don't necessarily want to tell you, "Well, okay, yes, our people do have access to your data. And here's the type of access they have." What about change control for us? That is a challenge in itself. Like most MSPs, you would think, we understand security. Most MSPs don't really have a robust change control process inside their organization. How do you feel about that?
That's going to be a fun one to work through, and build that out, because you're absolutely right. Most MSPs don't have that because we kind of live by the seat of our pants and like to move fast and break things, which is great when you don't have those regulatory obligations looking over your head.
Right.
But when you do, you've got to think about that, because when we look at the core pillars of information security, yep, there's confidentiality and integrity, but there's also availability. If we move fast and break something, we may knock a system offline. That system may impact confidentiality and integrity of a client environment, or just knock the client environment offline because we moved too fast on a firewall rule change and broke it.
Well, one of the things that I noticed is we were implementing our change control process, how many people seemed to be a little surprised at some of the things other people were doing. That was the first thing. You're like, "What are you doing?" And you're like, "Well, I'm doing this." And you're like, "Okay, I think that's a good call." Or, but as you go through the approval process, part of that is deciding on whether that change is going to have a risk impact. When we were going through doing some pieces, I think a few days ago, we had to, we had to pause what we were doing and put in a change control process as we were doing some additions and changes. And, we had to go through the process of making sure all the parties that were involved were informed about that. And does that slow you down a little bit? Sure. But I think that does make you better, healthier, more wise about the choices, because some of these decisions that you're making, if your passion is just getting the job done and not necessarily looking at it from a risk security perspective, you could compromise your own system in your zeal to try to accomplish the objective.
Yeah, and looking at our difference in kind of roles and everything, Bobby, you own the business. So at the end of the day, the buck stops with you. And that also means if it hits the fan and there's a major issue and, security incident, at the end of the day, they're going to be looking at you as the fundamental business owner, person in charge, to say, why did you allow this to happen? What did you do about this? And we're seeing those cases coming out from various courts where the person in charge of information security is being held responsible for that, both in court for civil penalties and criminal penalties.
Yeah, they're not playing around, and I think it's only going to get worse, and it's just a matter of time before compliance becomes a requirement for our industry. Well, and I think also one of the things that's important is there's organizations called C3PO. I mean, we both know what that is, but for those that may not know, that's the nomenclature they use for the people that are going to be doing the assessments. They're organizations, they're privately owned organizations. They're not a government body. It's a company like anybody else that decided that's what they want to do. They want to do assessments for CMMC, and they've gone through a rigorous process. One of those processes are that they get assessed by a government agency called DIBCAT. And DIBCAT, when they do their assessment, they go through and they're trying their best to do as good as how the ruling is going to come out for that assessment piece. But what those C3POs are required to do is to build an infrastructure to support CUI so that they can sort of show the assessors that they know how to do this and they know how to do it correctly, and they've created all the procedures and processes around it. So the concept there is to kind of build a system so that they can kind of show their homework, that they know what they're doing. Well, for us, that's not how we're sort of doing it. Like, we have to build a system to receive CUI that's literally going to be in real production. We are building a system that isn't just going to be a little box that we're going to throw in the corner. So as an MSP, our process is going to be much harder, I think, than most of the C3POs that have had to go through, is because we're going to have to actually build a system that is going to be leveraged to support our clients. And so it's not going to be just an in-a-box kind of thing. It's actually going to be a production environment that we're going to be utilizing and trying to move forward. And not many organizations, when they've gone through those, have done that. But I think that, like, most MSPs are going to have a production system that they're going to be utilizing, because that's what they're going to be leveraging to support their clients out of. Can you talk to us about the challenge of that?
Yeah. It's kind of like trying to change the wheels on a car while you're going down the freeway almost. Because we look at the client environments out there, Johnny's Lug Nut Shop, Stacy's Widget Factory, et cetera. They may be doing business with the federal government and be subject to these regulations. They're going to be reaching out to MSPs saying, hey, we need help with this. So they may be sending in, and this is where it gets really complicated in for the MSP side of stuff, is where's that data flowing? What's the interaction from the MSP side of stuff, and how's that plugging into those environments? So to your point, yeah, we've got to build that system that has to live in production, because we're going to be taking those requests from clients that are going to be related to protecting those security assets or directly involved with the CUI environment itself. And we've got to take that and manage it securely and with compliance in mind, while also supporting the client, supporting our existing clients that may not be bound by the same regulations, while also realizing that we may be, in a way, producing our own kind of variants of CUI and whatnot as well. So it's one of the big challenges that I keep seeing in most businesses and even MSPs is, what data do we have and where does it live? And you never know until you have to go through those exercises, track it all down, and then map it all out.
Yeah.
And from how clients love to submit stuff, it could be email, phone call. Some companies may even still take stuff over fax.
Right.
And is that email coming in direct to me, direct to you, direct to a service board, somehow using the contact us sales form on the website, or through a random voicemail? Like, we don't know until you start mapping those processes out. And now we've got to rein that in, secure it, apply all the security controls for 800.171 on top of it. That's a challenge, and we can't take our systems down to do it, because if we take our systems down to do it, we can't support our clients.
Right. Yeah. And so I think the possibility of us generating something that would be very interesting in the audit would be like SIEM data, right? So there's indications that look like that's going to be some type of security protection data. We were lucky enough to have Karen Stanford on a podcast previously, and one of the things that she shared is, SIEM or SIEM data, however you want to say it, as CUI in the FedRAMP environment. They consider that protected data. And I have a feeling that's probably going to be how the ruling is going to fall down for us. And the leaked document did indicate that was probably going to be the case. And so what that would, if you kind of look at how sort of FedRAMP is handled in the leaked document, I don't think it's very much of a leap for us to kind of say, okay, well, I think they're going to treat that type of data, like your vulnerability scanning or your SIEM data, is going to be sensitive, and they're going to want to see that data stored in a place that's going to have parity with who's going to be assessing, which means wherever that data is going to be sitting is going to have to be at least level 2 certified. And that rules out a lot of just over-the-counter SIEM solutions. You can't just utilize those. So as an MSP, picking the right tool that is going to be able to pass that, because this isn't 100% clear yet, it's possible an MSP could say, we're going to just go for it, and then come to find out they chose wrong. Or they could go, you know what, we're going to be more restrictive and try to pick solutions that are going to, either be in the FedRAMP marketplace or build something their own in their own level 2 certified, GCC High or Amazon equivalent of a government based system that you could store that data in. As an MSP, if you don't right now reach out to all of your clients and say, are you doing contract work that might fall under the DFARS that are going to require us to be level 2 certified? If you don't know how to go through that process, you need to get with someone that can help explain like what kind of information you want to talk with your clients about to find out whether or not they fall under that requirement. Because it's surprising how some organizations are literally going to be held liable to do this, and they're still not even aware that they're going to have to do that. So you need to talk with your clients to find out if they're going to have to eventually get level 2 certified. And then you're going to have to make a choice as an MSP. Do you want to get level 2 certified, or do you want to pass that client to someone who does? Or right now, I'm unaware of any organization that can assume the responsibility of the level 2 aspect of it, but still let an MSP just provide regular, support. That creature, as far as I know, doesn't exist. So you're going to have to make a choice about what you want to do with those clients and yourself. And that's an interesting discussion. What's your thoughts about that, Adam? And have you seen that in the industry already starting to play out?
Yeah, I have. Because you look at the organizations out there, for any MSP to look at a client and just look at that client and say, we can no longer support you due to your contractual obligations.
Right.
It feels like you're leaving money on the table and you're just walking away from it, which for anyone, we live in a capitalist society, right? We all love to make money. Our money pays the bills. That's fun stuff. So it's always a bad feeling just to look at money on the table and say, no thanks. But there's the risk, the cost, the liability that comes with it. And to the point of, not seeing, any of the companies willing to take on that responsibility for level 2, but allow an MSP in there, that makes perfect sense because, MSPs, we're an interesting industry, and sharing those responsibilities and liabilities can come back to haunt the CMMC provider. So
right.
Keeping an eye on those responsibilities and scope, if the MSP and that well-meaning technician says, well, if I go ahead and make this change, I can solve this ticket and close this ticket. Did they just expose CUI to unauthorized individuals? Did they allow a data leak? Did they allow a security incident that has to be reported to the DoD? It's too risky, too much of a liability, and I can't see any CMMC focused provider looking at that and willing to accept that risk.
To say, we'll handle all responsibilities that are in scope. The out of scope pieces, we'll let that continue to be utilized by their incumbent MSP that they're utilizing. I don't even know how you would try to accomplish it. I'm not saying it can't be done. I'm just like, right now, I couldn't even wrap my head around about how you could accomplish that objective and do it in a way that with a lot of confidence. There would have to be a tremendous amount of planning and collaboration between whoever's going to take on that CMMC piece and whoever's going to take on this traditional piece. And that triad of individuals, the organization that's going to have to get assessed, the organization that's going to be assisting with the CMMC and taking on the technical requirements, and then just the MSP organization that's going to work with the out of scope assets, that would be super challenging. Now, I could see that happening and eventually playing out as the industry becomes way more mature down the road. I definitely could see that happening. But off the gate, that's going to be pretty tough because a lot of people are just trying to figure out how to do the passing and blocking of this game right now, let alone the West Coast offense that's way more complicated of how to accomplish the tasks at hand. And I think that really kind of underlines the challenges of, as an MSP, you have to make a really difficult choice of whether or not you want to participate if you have clients that are going to be forced because the leaked information that came out through OIRA indicated that if you're an MSP that's providing technical support that's going to fall, that are in the controls of CMMC, you're going to have to get level 2 certified yourself, which makes sense in my opinion, just because if you're going to be supporting an organization that's going to have that level of security, you have to have the knowledge to be able to help make sure that what you're doing, just like you're talking about the change control example earlier in the discussion, you're not going to compromise their compliance by your attempt to support them. And I think asking and requiring an MSP to get level 2 so that they are forced to understand and play by those same rules makes sense. In my opinion.
Yeah, I agree. And I think where this gets extra interesting, and what I'll call it the spicy item here, is those flow downs and where that comes in, because you can read that item and say, okay, from the MSP perspective, that also means my vendors that are responsible for those things need to start pursuing their level 2 certifications as well.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Well, okay. We might differ on that a little bit, but yeah, I can definitely see how that's the fear that vendors are having, that they're going to be pushed to go in that direction. I think that's part of the reason why they're just turning a deaf ear to it, because they don't want to participate, because they've got a hard enough problem just trying to keep their release cadence of the products they're utilizing. And for them, if they can just pretend it doesn't exist, put their fingers in their ears and go la 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 the whole time and just keep on marching, then they can keep working on what they need to do and not have to worry about addressing that. But I think, we'll have to see how the ruling comes out and some of the precedents it plays. I in my heart, you might be right. That might play out that way, that more vendors are going to have to be level 2 themselves. I don't think that's going to be the case. I feel like cooler heads are going to prevail, and that if you have the right evidence and those types of things, that most vendors can dodge that requirement if they're being transparent and having a well-defined matrix and they're providing the right information. They can participate. It's just they want to know what data is going where, and who has access to what, right? So if you have a client or an agent that you put on an asset that is in scope, a fully CUI asset, the assessor is going to want to know, what is that tool's capabilities as far as, and what can it do to have access to data? And then from that vendor, what can they remote in immediately and start doing things, and you have no control? Because I've seen some vendors that have that capability with their tool. They literally could have total access to your asset the moment you put that tool on. And that needs to be disclosed. If those vendors have those types of capabilities, that information needs to be shared. And I just don't think all vendors want to share that kind of information. And so it just creates this weird situation that is being forced and will shake out in the next few years for sure. I think all vendors eventually will be expected to share that information, because I think more and more MSPs are starting to wise up that they need to expect that from them, whether they've got compliance being forced down their throats or not. They're going to start asking their vendors to be more transparent, because that makes sense, because we're going to be asked to have that level of transparency too. Everybody's going to be more in the next 5 years.
And I think to that point, one of the things that'll be interesting to see how that shakes out is, well, things could pan out where those vendors can document appropriately, have their SRMs in order, and be able to escape level 2 themselves. We're seeing a lot of other chatter from elsewhere in the government space about supply chain risk management practices and updates to those and enforcements of those. So I can see those two working hand in hand. I can also see the defense industrial base saying, okay, you know what, we're not going to push the vendors just yet. We're going to see what happens. But we've had some major incidents over the last couple of years. Let's look at the SolarWind incident, the Kaseya VSA incident, the LastPass incident, the Okta incidents. We're seeing more and more supply chain issues come up that's negatively impacting not only the federal government themselves, but multi-billion-dollar organizations. And I think it's a matter of time before there's a major incident like that, similar in scale to the Equifax incident from years ago, where eventually the federal government says, you know what, enough is enough. We're going to put an end to this, especially in the defense industrial base where national security is a major concern.
Well, with SOC, let's just say, you have the ability to pick how you do certain types of scoping, right?
Mm-hmm.
And when you're doing that, you can sort of move the needle around to try to accomplish your favorable report that you're trying to look for. You don't really have that kind of wiggle room for the most part when it comes to CMMC. It's either in scope or it's out of scope from the perspective of which assets you have. And once that data has been identified that you have, like, it's like nuclear waste, wherever it goes, that it's in scope to some capacity. And that's not the case with SOC. You don't have like specific data you're trying to track that influences your scope. You can just kind of define what you want and then pay to be assessed through that process. I'm not trying to belittle SOC, but it's definitely apples and oranges from that perspective. And with that being said, I see that for vendors, if they don't start becoming more and more transparent about trying to be like about what they've got and how they have it, and they start not paying attention to CMMC, I see other compliance requirements are gonna have to hit them, because if they're not being transparent to share this kind of information and they're not being held to a certain standard, there are plenty of organizations that have outstanding glowing SOC 2 reports that have been breached. And have had serious security issues and have serious security issues. So compliance doesn't necessarily mean good security practices. And I think what's going to happen is those organizations that are being more transparent about their security practices and how they do things are going to fare a lot better in the market as more MSPs and other organizations start to wise up that they need to start asking these types of questions so that they can start making wise choices to not have, like you're saying, downstream risk with the vendors that they're picking.
I mean, we look at the Microsoft incident that happened earlier this year. Microsoft had an incident. Federal government systems were potentially compromised. And Microsoft released their report basically saying, here's all the crazy technical things a nation state actor had to go through to compromise these environments. With the notes of, here's what we learned from this, and here's what we did to address this, so this shouldn't be an issue again. You don't see reports coming out of the federal government saying we need to switch to Red Hat, or we need to switch to Google Workspace for all of our federal stuff anymore. The government's still giving billions of dollars to Microsoft a year for all their solutions. It's like you said, that matter of transparency, that awareness of saying, okay, something did happen. We did all the right things. We did our best here. We maintain that level of defensibility of taking it seriously, doing the right things. And while something still did happen, we're going to be better next time.
Yeah. Well, Adam, thank you so much for joining us today. We're definitely going to have you more often on the podcast to talk about some heavy hitting things. We've got a lot of great people that have already pre-recorded and they're kind of in the queue to get scheduled. I don't know if you know this, Adam, we've already pre-recorded all the way into February now.
Ooh, nice.
We've had a lot of great participation from other individuals. We're going to have, let's see here, Amira's coming out. Joy's, I think, is dropping this week because the time of this recording is 11/28/2023. So I think Joy's is dropping this Thursday. Amira's, I think, is next week after that. And then we have Will. He's going to be talking from Fifth Wall. He's going to be talking about some good stuff about insurance and other things that are really, really good. We've got Karen Stanford, who has a ton of experience with FedRAMP, and we kind of talk about the differences between the assessors that are going to be coming from that world, right? And what that's going to be looking like dealing with an MSP or a small business. We are not the same animal. Yeah, we're not the same animal. And I love Karen. She's very transparent. We're definitely going to have her back on the show. She shared tons of great information. I'm looking to that podcast as well. And then, of course, the infamous, legendary Matt Lee. He has, we go through 10 things that most MSPs should be doing that will be critical that you should be doing before you try to take a charge at CMMC. And we, I triggered Matt a few times with some really good, like, how do you think this should be handled? And he's like, this is how it needs to be done. As always, Matt is such an advocate of doing the right thing, and his passion always just comes through. And that's one of the things I absolutely love about him. So we've just got so many more podcasts that are coming out. I just wish I could just release them all at one time, but we're slow rolling it every week. So stay tuned to that. And I believe the cadence is on Thursdays. So just, follow us on Spotify or follow us through YouTube or any other type of podcast media we have. And thank you so much for attending, Adam. And I look forward to having you back for a lot more in the future.
Yep, absolutely. It'll be a lot of fun.
All right. Until next time, everybody. See you later.
Make sure to follow us on LinkedIn and YouTube to stay up to date on the latest CMMC news. We hope you guys enjoyed today's episode and listen out for the next one. But until then, keep on climbing.